Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to how the UK is becoming a third world economy. Pretty strong title, if I say so myself. Now I do a lot of reactions focused on the US, not many on the UK, but as someone who's from this country, and this video I saw it pop up and I thought, you know what, it's got this many views in only a day. It's got to have some sort of substance to it. I mean, I've seen videos like this sort of relatively similar in the past. And yeah, basically just all talking about how the UK's falling apart and it's only going to get worse. But I guess we're going to see in this video what this channel's going to say, and how in the mud we really are. But yeah, let's jump into this reaction and see what this is about.
London, the city of dreams and one of the wealthiest urban areas in the world.
The city of dreams? Is that how London's seen? I don't really think it is, but I don't know.
Its economy is worth roughly £508 billion, which equals $652 billion. If it were an independent state, London would rank as the 22nd largest economy in the world.
Wait, what? What's going on here? Why has it gone from trillion to billion? Oh, it's not. I don't actually understand why it's gone from trillion to billion. I'm very confused. I think he just was supposed to put billion here, wasn't he? That is kind of crazy for a city.
Precisely above Argentina and Sweden. However,
Sweden? And Argentina is a massively populated country as well, so that is crazy. Also shows how over-reliant we are on London as a country. But also, my city is shown here. Why is Norwich being shown?
However, London's prosperity and that of...
Oh, these are the regions. So this is the region here. I don't know why Norwich is being shown as a city, because there's much bigger cities in this region. 26 billion, 28 billion. It's quite a lot of money. 56, but yeah, I guess some of this is connected to London as well. 34 billion. Okay, so it's got a very... It's in this little area alone, compared to everywhere else, it's got a very high amount of money. It's pretty much got double all the other regions, and it's tiny.
Southeast England is atypical for the country. This small area makes up nearly half the UK's GDP, while having about...
Damn. So when these videos have been said before, I'm literally from this city, right? And it's sort of, I feel like my part of the country isn't like getting the effects as extreme as a lot of other parts of the country. Like certain parts in the north, also in the south, like these regions as well. There's a lot of like issues there. And there's issues throughout the country, but I just feel like my city, I'm very lucky to live in a city where the extremes aren't being shown as much. Like when you sort of see videos going of like people going to like the UK's most like, I don't know, most struggling cities in terms of financially and also just poverty and stuff, it sort of shows like a lot of like how the UK is in general. And I guess I'm just very lucky to be from a city where I don't really feel like that's the case. There's definitely places within this region, especially on the coast around this area, that aren't great, but it's interesting to see this map and the fact that it's actually showing this whole region as the most wealthy.
About a third of its population. If one were to amputate London's output, it would reduce British living standards by...
Wow. The UK would sit in 49th place out of the 50 US states. Holy shit. What?
14%, just enough to slip ahead of the US state of Mississippi. Yeah.
What's going on here? Hello?
The UK has seen better days. The last 10 years have been particularly tough. Real disposable income, which is income after taxes and benefits, has remained almost unchanged.
Yeah, it's bad.
The cost of goods and services has gone up.
Boom.
Compared to a decade ago, people can buy less with their income. Meanwhile, productivity is low, one of the lowest of any major economy, and housing has become nearly unaffordable, with the UK holding the record for the highest number of homeless people in the developed world.
Wow.
The cause for these issues is rooted in past political decisions. Britain has slumbered and stumbled its way through a number of setbacks. Now, the crisis has become endemic with no quick fix in sight. When you think about it, it's ironic. The UK was the first country to industrialize. Now it stands to become the first to deindustrialize.
Damn.
Seen from a larger angle, Britain's economy is on a downward trajectory. Prices are rising too fast. Just recently, housing prices rose by more than £2,200 in a month. Unfortunately, this wasn't widely reported in the media. Looking at things from all angles is what we do, and Ground News provides us with...
That's a very smooth ad. That was a very smooth ad, to be fair.
Stepped up every time we needed support. In fact, we have our and line. Recommend subscribing to the Vantage plan. Our link gets you 40% off. Keep in mind that by subscribing, you are directly supporting our channel. Not long ago, Britain was considered one of the world's most prosperous nations and a prime destination for skilled professionals seeking to advance their careers. Today, not so much. The state is under incredible socio-economic strain, more so than people realize. 3 back-to-back geopolitical shockwaves have left it with a colossal debt: Brexit, COVID, and the Ukraine war. The catalyst, however, dates to 2008, when the financial crisis introduced long-lasting effects. Like everyone else, Britain was deeply injured, but the way it handled the fallout set it apart from the rest of the developed world. After borrowing roughly £141 billion to bail out British banks, the government opted for austerity measures instead of investing in fiscal and social policies. There were no significant tax cuts or minimum wage increases. There was no inflation control, no housing assistance, no job creation programs. You get the point. For ordinary citizens, the consequences were devastating. Real household income dropped and then flatlined for the next 15 years. In economic terms, this is known as a lost decade. For added perspective, in 2007, the average British household was 8% less prosperous than those in Norway and just 6% behind those in the United States.
And look how much it's going to change now. It's just stayed the same in the UK, and I guess the US and Norway have just widened the gap significantly.
In the years following,
the UK's gone down.
The deficit grew substantially. Today, British households sit 20% behind Norway and 16% behind the US in terms of real income. This drop in living standards is felt vividly among the middle class. Real household income is a fundamental driver of economic activity. It encourages consumer spending and improves living standards, all of which contribute to economic growth. In Britain, however, the government prioritized corporate interests above all else. But even here, in the corporate world, the gains were mostly short-term. The productivity rate was left on the back burner, and no significant investments were made in this domain. For context, increasing productivity is one of the most efficient ways to grow an economy. But, contrary to popular belief, improving productivity does not mean working harder. Instead, the point is to boost economic output without increasing the amount of work. So, when an agriculture-driven economy switches to manufacturing microchips, productivity increases because the tech industry is more profitable and has greater margins. Ergo, the workforce is getting more out of it for the same amount of labor. That's why Japan is turning farmland into factories. It adds to productivity and ultimately improves the economy. In the UK, productivity output per capita debilitated after the 2008 crisis due to a lack of investment. This chart by the London School of Economics puts things into perspective. Before the crisis, productivity was growing at nearly 2% annually. After the crisis, however, it weakened substantially.
That's the where it could have been, and then it's just completely dropped off.
Changing a trend that had been in motion since the 1980s. The British workforce now has the second lowest productivity rate among the G7 economies, whereas before the 2008 crisis, it was second only to the US.
Flipping
The
hell.
simultaneous effects of sluggish real household income and low productivity explain a lot about the performance of the British economy. It is essentially fighting for its life.
Bloody hell. Paying dividends.
Britain's
Okay.
lost decade happened so casually, so indifferently, that none of its political parties acknowledged it, let alone addressed it. There was no political discourse on this subject that was affecting millions of households. But it was a crisis nonetheless, and so the discourse expressed itself in the form of Brexit. However, the uncertainty over Brexit made a bad situation even worse. It had a particularly sharp effect on direct foreign investment. According to the Bank of England, Brexit reduced investment by 25%, measured from 2016 to 2021. What's more, soon after Brexit, the onset of COVID exacerbated the economic crisis that was brewing underneath. The government stepped in and borrowed an additional £280 billion in its response to the coronavirus. This was deemed necessary to get the nation through the pandemic. But here's the thing, most of the COVID bailout was borrowed when interest rates were at historic lows, sitting around 0.1%. At the time, repayments were expected to be relatively manageable, and this might have been true were it not for the final nail in the coffin, the Ukraine war. The minute the Russians began their full-scale assault, access to Russian oil and gas was halted by sanctions and trade restrictions. At the same time, an energy crisis started brewing, and the cost of living jumped across Europe. The crisis hit close to home. British households were projected to pay 3 times the previous price just to heat their homes during the winter. Much of the public was anxious, so the British government intervened again. This time, it was one of Europe's most generous in financial support. Between 60 billion and 100 billion pounds in additional spending went straight into Britain's debt. The damage to households was mild, but the bailout gave the UK its biggest increase in debt as a share of its GDP.
Just look at that. Look at the debt over the last 4 years. That is brutal.
The synthesized pandemic crisis and energy crisis pushed inflation rates to new highs. In response, central banks ramped up the interest rate. For ordinary citizens, this meant that mortgage payments went up overnight by hundreds of pounds.
Wow.
Meanwhile, for the government, the high interest rate added additional billions to the national debt. While before, debt repayments were believed to be relatively manageable, after the energy crisis, debt became increasingly expensive to pay off. Servicing debt jumped from £40 billion per year to about £100 billion per year. That is a staggering £60 billion increase in spending, which is nearly the entire British defence budget. So, yeah, although admirably, Britain's support to Ukraine essentially broke its economy. Britain's debt interest bill is now the country's second largest item of spending. The surge in debt has reduced available funds by tens of billions of pounds, limiting spending on other items. Nearly all the country's public services are affected by it, which then depreciates the quality public services can provide.
So we're just screwed. It seems like in every aspect possible, the country is doomed. Great. Flipping hell.
At its core, economics is about more than markets and money alone. It is about understanding the choices people make and how demographics drive those decisions. Economics is essentially the study of people, not just numbers. After the COVID lockdowns subsided and life returned to normal, every advanced economy witnessed a surge in the workforce. People found jobs and moved on with their lives.
Right.
This chart shows the...
Why does it keep doing that? It's so frustrating. Now it's lowered the quality. I don't understand what's going on.
The change in economic activity among the G7 nations between 2019 and 2023.
Why though? What is the UK like? How is it happening? Like, why is it going so wrong here? I don't understand how it's failing so bad. look at Italy, for example. Like, Italy's a country that's, I feel like, gone through it recently financially. So much, there's so many issues. Look how much has gone up here. What is so wrong with the UK for it to just be failing so badly? It's the people in charge, like, but how has it gone so bad? I don't understand. Like France, for example, it's gone up too. Japan's gone up when it's already very high. Like, it's just crazy.
Britain stands out. Its workforce never recovered. It just stayed low. A smaller workforce has all sorts of ripple effects. It means less taxes to pay for services like healthcare and greater expenditures on social benefits. It also means people have less money to spend, which hurts businesses and affects the number of jobs available in an economy. So the consequences go full circle. But Britain's workforce problem goes much deeper than the missing 1%. Officially, unemployment in Britain is low by historical standards, sitting at 4.4%, which amounts to 1.5 million people. But reality paints a different picture. Britain's workforce is missing a staggering 11 million people. The government doesn't consider it unemployment though, calling it economically inactive instead.
Wow.
The reasoning is that this group, amounting to 9.4 million people, is technically not looking for work or is available to start a job. The Office for National Statistics explains
So would that be like, I guess, students and stuff, right? I assume that's what it's talking about.
the motives. About 2.1 million, aged between 16 and 24, are students.
So with this, students, so you're either in college, sixth form, or university. Students in university in the UK, if you're from the UK, if you're a British citizen, or you have settled status, or if you lived here for a certain amount of time, tend to get money from the government whilst they're at university because I guess it helps support them whilst they're sort of focusing on studies and stuff. So I mean, and obviously that's a lot of money through tax. I think some people can get up to like 9k a year, so they can get their course paid for, and then they can get an extra 9k a year maximum. No, I think 11k a year maximum if you've got like kids and stuff, and your whole circumstances, like you have no, like your circumstance at home is like you have no job, or you have certain job but not very good pay. You can get up to 11k a year for like a loan that you have to pay back over time once you get a job that hits a certain salary. So that would be the students. Unemployed is 500k and others is 200k. So I mean, wait, it says sick and caring, so that's fair enough. So I think with the students, that's probably draining the economy because they spend so much money paying students in the UK for their loans that they'll never receive all the money back. That's sort of like the loophole. I say the loophole. They're never going to receive all the money back unless that person becomes insanely wealthy. So it's just like, okay, these students aren't working and then they're getting all these loans because they need to get money somehow, and that's draining the economy a lot. But I mean, surely they'll just change the system, because if they're not working, there's a reason they're not working, because they're getting the money and they're studying. So I don't know how it would be in like a country like the US. Would students typically work in the US, or throughout Europe? Do students typically work whilst going? Because some students do work in the UK, some don't, and the ones that don't typically get loans. The ones that do work also can get loans as well, just not as much money. But yeah,
and thus economically inactive. About 3.5 million of those over 50 years old are out of the workforce due to sickness and early retirement. Meanwhile, at least 1 million people aged between 25 and 49 years do not work because of caring responsibilities.
so it's the young, although I guess 25 to 49 is typically like the ages that you're expected to work throughout that age. 16 to 24, you're still sort of finding your way in life. Some are working, some like students. Obviously, you could be a student at 25 to 49 as well. But that is an interesting stat. It's very split.
A workforce missing 11 million people is no small matter. But businesses need to keep running regardless. This puts tremendous pressure on the government, and one way to offset the difference is by opening the borders. So British lawmakers did just that. More people from outside the UK immigrated to the country to work with South Asia.
Right. So they want this, I guess, immigration to then give them the jobs that the others aren't working for certain reasons. Is that what he's saying?
Opening the borders. So British lawmakers did just that. More people from outside the UK immigrated to the country to work with South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa standing out. These migrant workers fill the gaps left by a reduced workforce. But simultaneously, the rapid and large-scale influx of immigrants has raised social tensions within the nation.
Yeah.
People feel threatened by the changing ethnic demographics, and some lawmakers exploit such moods to score political goals. In early August 2024, anti-immigration protests and riots rocked Britain, affecting over 20 towns. While the riots have peaked, addressing the origins will take much longer to fix. In its entirety, Britain's economic chronicle, marked by a continuous decline, illustrates how one crisis triggers another and yet another, and ultimately leads to a chain of events from which there is no immediate relief. This is the bed that was made, and now people must sleep in it. On the plus side, every nation goes through ups and downs, and the UK is no exception. London is still one of the wealthiest and most innovative cities on the planet.
Wealthiest, yes. But the wealth isn't really shared. It's just a very wealthy city that the money stays within a certain section.
Eventually, things will get better. But until then, Britain will function like a third world economy attached to London. I've been your host,
Jesus. Well, that was a promising video. This country is absolutely done for. Damn. If any Brit thinks about doing plumbing in Poland, we are open for business. How the roles have reversed. How times have changed. As someone who lives in the UK, the decline of living standards and the general slide in the state of this country in the last 10 to 15 years is shocking. See, I'm too young to ever really understand how it was. I just grew up in the change, to be honest, which is great to know. As someone rightly said, from an empire where the sun never sets to a small little grumpy island where it never rises, Britain has come a long way. Turns out not producing anything nor providing any services isn't good for the economy. Who would have funked it? God, that's the greatest insult to be compared to Mississippi. You must have severely screwed up. During feudalism, 10% of the population had 90% of the stuff. We're almost back to that. As an Indian, I would want India to give Britain some foreign aid, some used children clothes, food grains. Alright, Jesus Christ. Don't laugh, it's come to that. Britain should try podcasting. Everyone's podcasting now, it might help. Well, there we go. Score some fucking goals. What's going on in these comment sections? There we go. This is an interesting video looking at how the UK is doomed, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.